Before moving on to the next section, I want to stress a point about the plant at Bunamanowitz. Synthetic rubber was actually the only part of the 4-year plan that was a success. It was not a success for IG Farben. The amount of money they spent at that particular plant actually was anywhere on a low of 778 Reich marks up to some people estimate $1 billion. It never produced a single ounce of Buna or synthetic rubber. They did have 3 other factories though, and the entire aggregate program was the most successful component of the 4-year plan. And this is where we're going to go next. What I want to do is also now talk about primary documents and how when we start looking at and drilling down a little bit into primary documents, how they support my original statement is that we need to be looking at the Holocaust in the context, the larger context of the Second World War. Okay? In August of 1936, Adolf Hitler put together this massive memorandum. It's called the 4-year plan. And what he basically did was outline a plan for rearmament, camouflaged as an economic plan. In this particular document, he does what he does in a lot of documents or speeches. He starts out talking about struggle, how nations struggle, and conflict. Very big topics with Hitler. Bolshevism, talks about Bolshevism, the threat that they are. And then, of course, he talks about what the threat worldwide Jewry is to Germany and to Europe. The largest part of the document deals with the economic situation of Germany and their quest for self-sufficiency. Talks about rearmament as well, food, living space. One good way to sum it up is this. We, in his words, we are overpopulated and cannot feed ourselves from our own resources. What matters is the taking of those measures which can bring about a final solution for the future and the temporary easing of our condition during the transitional period. The final solution lies in extending our space. The importance of this document is such that Hitler tells us in his own words why it's important. This is from what's called his table talks, which are private conversations that he had. He said on October 1941, "I write drafts of letters only concerning matters of vital importance. It's what I did, for example, for the 4-year plan last year. It's what I was contemplating when I was contemplating the action against Russia." Interesting enough, there's one point in the 4-year plan where he takes the rubber manufacturers to task. He says, either we possess today a private industry, in which case its job is to rack their brains about methods of overproduction, or we believe that it's the government's job to determine methods of production. And in that case, we have no further need for private industry. Well, he ends up closing it with encouraging the Reichstag to pass 2 laws. And here's what they are. 1, a law providing the death penalty for economic sabotage. And the second law is a law making the whole of Jewry, and I'm reading right from the plan, the whole of Jewry liable for all damages upon the German economy, and thus upon the German people. By 1939, there was not one single part of the German economy, of the economy of Germany, that was not impacted by the 4-year plan. And it consumed a large amount of his industrial capital. But it's interesting. The plan was not without its problems. If we come to this with the impression that, hey, their bureaucracy, their system just worked great, everything was flowing, we'd be wrong. Let me give you an example of some of the problems. They had a problem of organization. They actually never had a central planning authority for while the whole thing existed. They had a problem of communication. The head of the textile department said, the attempt to get any kind of sense of direction or guidance for my future work within the ministry, this is the Ministry of Economics, it's fruitless. No directive has been issued by the 4-year plan, and none were expected. They had a problem of cooperation. Tug, Keitel, they were at odds with each other constantly. Let us try to possibly eliminate the unfortunate case of rivals which keep cropping up between their two groups and organizations. They had a problem of execution. The Italian-German economy was so strained that any holdup in one area immediately held up another area. Armaments manufacturers were refusing to take orders because they just couldn't keep up. They had a problem with priorities. General Thomas wrote in 1939, November 39, he said, we're never going to conquer England with radios, vacuum cleaners, and kitchen equipment. Even a cursory study of the household goods that were produced when they're gearing up for armaments, it's comical. They had a problem of preparation. Under Hermann Goering's watch, as head of the 4-year plan, the German economy was ill-prepared in 1941 for the invasion of Russia. They actually had fewer planes for that invasion than they did for Poland. And finally, they had a problem of history. And what I mean by that is Hitler and his generals, they disagreed on how to go to war. Hitler was a proponent of the Blitzkrieg. His generals were more in favor of total war. Their memories were stuck in the trenches, pardon the pun, of World War I. And if you read the 4-year plan, you'll see that there are seeds when he talks about temporary fix compared to a long-term fix. I think his temporary fixes are invasions in the Blitzkrieg style, which means you don't have to have a lot of stockpile of armaments, but you can, and this is basically the way he conquered most of Europe, by the way, was small, brief wars. That was actually the style of war he wanted for his war against the Russians, but he changed his mind. The army didn't advance on Moscow like they should have. And many historians believe that if he did, that they would have been successful. Thank God they weren't. What about the Jews in the 4-year plan? Hitler appointed Hermann Goering as head of the 4-year plan. Well, Goering hated the Jews. And he was very vocal about this in private and in public. He exploited Jews for labor from the concentration camps. He was constantly carrying out policies of expropriation and Aryanization. His appetite was completely insatiable in his hatred. It's almost like the business he was running. In 1940, he was in charge of this company called the Hermann Goering Works Company. He didn't own it, he was the head of it. And in 3 years, he took that company to be the largest conglomerate in all of Europe, surpassing IG Farben. Part of his success was Aryanizing businesses and folding them into his camp. Let's go back and refresh our minds about something. Why do we want to look at the Holocaust, or why should we, in the larger context of the Second World War? This document, the Four-Year Plan, was a major part of the German economy in terms of armament, and that was preparations for war. It came under Hermann Goering, who's in charge of the Four-Year Plan. The Four-Year Plan was responsible for the following. Right? November 12th, the expiation fine against the Jews for the Kristallnacht. The Four-Year Plan, it passed a regulation for the elimination of the Jews from the economic life of Germany. The Four-Year Plan, it was Goering who ordered Heydrich to prepare a plan for the final solution. Goering even had his state secretary Neumann at Wannsee, the Wannsee Conference. The Four-Year Plan was not so much a birth certificate for the rebirth of an economy. It was, to a degree, I'd say, a death sentence.